Hello and welcome to Anime Memories, and on this episode, I'm going to be talking about Kenichi, the Mightiest Disciple. Like everyone, I have my own preferences when it comes to anime, however, even in genres I don't like, I can usually find exceptions. I enjoyed Amagami SS even though I don't like harems, and I love Big Gata HK despite not being a fan of comedies or ecchis. Even with battle shonen, my least favourite genre, I was able to come up with 4 exceptions. There's both the original Fullmetal Alchemist and Brotherhood, which are masterpieces. Then there's My Hero Academia, which was my 3rd favourite anime of 2016. And finally, we have this series. It hooked me so much as a teenager, however, after it was over, it mysteriously vanished from my memory for about 10 years. I wasn't sure why I forgot about it so quickly, but I thought I might be able to figure that out through a second viewing. So, let's get into it. Kenichi Shirahama has been seen as a weakling for the majority of his teenage life, since his peers have given him the nickname Weak Knees. He attempts to change his image by joining the karate club, but the other members don't want him there, so they just beat him up all day, hoping that he'll quit. When he's at his lowest point, a fellow classmate named Miyu gives him a real chance to change himself and fight back against the bullies. She gives him directions to a dojo called Ryozanpaku, where he receives expert tutelage from 6 different martial arts masters. However, as he trains to become stronger, he gains the attention of tougher and tougher opponents, and eventually, he comes into the crosshairs of the most dangerous gang in the city, Ragnarok. Like with many battle shonen, this is a straight up power fantasy, and it's one of the most riveting power fantasies that I've ever seen. I think that almost everyone has been picked on or humiliated at some point, and the story capitalizes on that by having the protagonist be this normal weak kid who's constantly getting pushed around and talked down to. However, through hard work, he's able to become one of the strongest people in his area. This is of course out of the realm of possibility, with some of the fighters being stupidly powerful, like being able to flick a wall and have it break open kind of powerful, but by having the main character start off as this socially awkward nerd, it helped make this ridiculously dumb series very relatable to me. Although while it does have its emotional moments, it mostly sticks to a humorous tone. The writers clearly recognise that the plot can become laughable, so they decide to embrace that and have as much fun as possible. This would usually be something I appreciate. The problem here is that the comedy's shit. To explain why, I need to go through the 3 main types of jokes that this anime uses. The first are jokes about how Kenichi is scared of everything. Whether it be a hard training regime or a strong opponent, he's always finding something to run away from. This was never funny, and it only made me hate Kenichi more than I otherwise would have. To be fair, I can see what the creators were going for here, but it seems like they were purposely holding Kenichi's progress for the sake of a few lame gags, which was really frustrating. The second type of joke is basically, hey, these girls have big tits, and all the guys want to grab their big tits. Isn't that funny? This did get a few chuckles out of me, I will admit, however, I found myself groaning way more often than I laughed. This was just trashy, low effort, bottom of the barrel humour, and I'd hoped that a cherished anime of my past wouldn't have resorted to that. The final type were the ones that were actually clever, with good setups and well-timed punchlines. With how horrible I found the comedy in the first few episodes, I was pleasantly surprised that there were a number of jokes that were decently written. Unfortunately, the first 2 types are more prevalent, especially at the beginning, which was really rough. However, it does steadily improve, and by the end, it's not good, but it's tolerable. It's at least at the stage where I wasn't cringing every 5 minutes. Another possible negative, depending on who you are, is that this is extremely fan service heavy. Almost every female character has a busty hourglass figure with tight revealing clothing that accentuates that figure. While the fan service wasn't a deal breaker for me, it made me feel kinda uncomfortable while watching it. I was also fairly ambivalent about the romance subplot. For the first 30 episodes, they don't give you any legitimate reason why Kenichi would fall for Miyu, outside of just general physical attraction, which I guess makes sense. They're both teenagers, but it makes him look really shallow. Although there are a few touching scenes later on where it seems like Kenichi's feelings for Miyu are genuine and that he wants her for more than just her body. If they had have done more with this and given the romance some time to grow, it could have been one of the best parts of the show, but as it is, it's more of an afterthought. And I have a few more complaints about the story, but I think I've grumbled on for long enough, so I'm just going to rapid fire off the rest of the problems I had. So, they make liberal use of recap footage. There's a series of painfully boring filler episodes about a quarter of the way through. The whole men should never fight women message is questionable, especially with how strong the female characters are, and even though they do their absolute best to wrap up the plot, they weren't able to cover the entirety of the manga, so there's a ton of story that you'll never get to see. Whew, okay. Why do I like this show again? Now, the criticism train continues to roll on with the characters since, during the whole first arc, Kenichi was a spineless bitch. While he goes through a lot of crap, it's hard for me to feel sorry for him when he curls up into the fetal position every time an obstacle is put in front of him. What also doesn't help is the voice acting. Both in Japanese and English, he speaks in a high-pitched whine.
No, I'm a shy. I haven't trained enough yet to spar with you. Hello?
Again, his cowardice and whingy voice are meant to be comedic, but since I didn't find it funny, it came off as annoying. Although I slowly began to notice that there were several scenes where he showed great courage and had a sense of honour. As the show progressed, these moments started to significantly outweigh the parts where he was shrieking like a 5-year-old girl. This creates a disconnect in his personality since, during one scene he'll have this never say die attitude, willing to take as much pain as necessary to get the job done. And then 10 minutes later he'll flee at the slightest hint of trouble. I think whether you like him or not will be dependent on how much you're willing to ignore. If you can push past his "I can't do this" shtick, he has a lot of positive qualities. However, the most likeable characters come in the form of the opponents that Kenichi fights. Many of them have engaging backstories that explains how they became so violent, and I think I would be just as spiteful and jaded if I went through the exact same things they did. Seeing their character arcs come to their conclusion were the best parts of the show for me, and it made me excited to see how future fights pan out. When it comes to everyone else, they're okay, but they don't add anything substantial. The Masters all have one personality trait that they stick to for the entire series, and outside of Kensei, who has a pretty good side plot with his brother, they don't bring anything compelling to the story. Miyu is a bit better, but like the Masters, she doesn't change all that much, which makes her seem less important than Kenichi and the members of Ragnarok, who change considerably. So like with the story, the characters are very much a mixed bag. Now, similar to many other anime of this genre, the animation is below average due to the budget having to be stretched across 50 episodes. The number of frames for each movement are pretty low, making the character seem stiff, and during the comedic parts, the quality drops even further and becomes less detailed and overly cartoony. This becomes a big problem during the fight since the punches, kicks and blocks can look sluggish and flat. Although when they use the right shots and frame everything in a way that hides the limitations, the action can be well done. I normally come down hard on shows that use shortcuts like speed lines and stills, but here, I have nothing but respect because I can see how much they improve the battles. The animation alone isn't enough to make the action exciting, but with the help of clever workarounds, I found myself really getting into these fights, so I think overall the visuals get a thumbs up from me. What isn't getting a thumbs up though is the music, and I'm basically going to recycle the exact same thing I said about the Attack on Titan soundtrack. It's barely worth mentioning and all the songs are generic and uninspired. Now the dub is a bit more notable as it's above average with fairly good performances. My personal favourites were firstly Chris Sabat, who puts on this bassy alpha voice as Shio the karate instructor, and Chris Kaysen clearly had a blast playing Siegfried.
No, my friend, you will not stoop as low as Ragnarok does their jerks, and you are great.
While there were some that I didn't like, I've already ragged on Kenichi's voice, and Apachai's voice was really weird. However, the general level of quality was decent to great. As you can tell, there was a lot that I hated about this, and I was way more critical than I thought I was going to be. Although I never came to a point where I wanted to stop watching. I could have dropped this at any time, but I was having too much fun, and I don't think nostalgia had anything to do with it either. I was genuinely enjoying myself. So I guess I'd give this a very cautious recommendation. If you're a fan of shonen battle anime, this will probably be a good pick for you, but if you're not, you could love it. However, honestly, it could go either way. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you have any feedback, please leave a comment, and if you want to see more, feel free to subscribe as well. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.